The sound that came from beneath the floorboards didn't belong in a quiet suburban basement. It was too hollow, too desperate, like something trying to be remembered after being buried too long. I froze mid-turn with the wrench in my hand, staring at the old furnace I'd been sent to fix, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. That was the exact second everything changed, because a simple repair job turned into a question that would follow me for the rest of my life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways life brings people together, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest decisions can change everything. My name is Nathan Carter, and at the time I was barely holding my life together. I was working odd handyman jobs across a quiet neighborhood in Ohio, trying to stay afloat after my divorce and the slow collapse of my construction business. Most days felt like I was patching up other people's homes while mine, my life, remained in pieces. When Mrs. Rebecca Lawson called me about a broken furnace in her basement, I didn't expect anything more than another routine job. Her house sat at the end of Maplewood Drive, an aging two-story home with peeling white paint and a yard that had once been carefully maintained, but now looked forgotten. Rebecca herself seemed just as worn down. She was in her early 40s, maybe, with tired eyes and a polite smile that didn't quite reach them. There was something quiet about her, not shy exactly, but withdrawn, like she was carrying more than she let on. She led me down to the basement without much conversation. The air down there was cold and damp, carrying that familiar smell of dust, rust, and old memories. I got to work immediately, grateful for something to focus on. Fixing things had always been easier than dealing with people. That's when I heard it, that strange, hollow sound beneath the floor. At first I'd told myself it was just the pipes, or maybe the old wooden beams shifting, but it came again, softer this time, almost like a faint knock swallowed by the earth. I paused, listening carefully, but the silence returned like it had never been broken. I shook it off and kept working. About 20 minutes later, Rebecca came down the stairs. She stood at the bottom step, watching me in a way that made me slightly uneasy. It wasn't suspicious, it was searching, like she was trying to decide something important. I told her the furnace would be fixed soon, just needed a couple of replacements. She nodded but didn't leave. Instead, she stepped closer, wrapping her arms around herself as if the cold had suddenly become unbearable. And then she asked the question. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it hit harder than anything I'd heard in years. She asked if I had ever lost someone and wished I had done something differently, anything differently, to keep them from slipping away. For a second I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I had. My marriage hadn't ended because of one big mistake. It ended because of 1,000 small ones. Late nights at work, missed calls, unspoken apologies. By the time I realized what I was losing, it was already gone. My ex-wife had walked out not with anger but with exhaustion. And that was somehow worse. I didn't say all that out loud. I just nodded. Rebecca looked down at the floor, her eyes tracing the same spot where I'd heard that strange sound earlier. Her voice softened as she explained that her younger brother Caleb had lived with her for years. He had struggled, mentally, emotionally, and she had tried to help him, but things had become overwhelming. One night, after a fight neither of them fully understood, he left. That was 3 years ago. He never came back. The police had searched. There were reports, interviews, dead ends. Eventually the case went cold, people moved on. But she hadn't. She told me she still heard things sometimes, footsteps, scratches, faint noises that didn't make sense. Everyone told her it was grief playing tricks on her mind, that she needed to let go, but she couldn't. And then she asked me something that made my chest tighten. She asked if I thought she was crazy for believing he might still be trying to come back. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked around the basement again, at the uneven floorboards, at the old storage area in the corner half covered by a warped wooden panel, at the faint draft I hadn't noticed before, and then I heard it again. That same hollow sound. But this time, I knew exactly where it came from. I walked slowly toward the corner, my heartbeat picking up in a way that felt irrational. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. But something inside me refused to ignore it. Rebecca followed, her breath shallow, her hands trembling. The panel was heavier than it looked. It took both of us to pull it aside, revealing a narrow crawl space beneath the floor. The air that came out was stale and cold, like it had been trapped for years. At first there was nothing, just darkness. And then, faintly, movement. It wasn't what you'd expect. There was no dramatic reveal, no sudden rush of answers, just the quiet, fragile reality of what we found. A bundle of old belongings, a worn backpack, and inside it, a journal. Rebecca collapsed to her knees before I could even react. Her hands shook as she opened it, flipping through pages filled with messy handwriting. Dates, thoughts, regret, apologies. It turned out Caleb had come back that night, not to leave again, but because he had nowhere else to go. He had hidden in the crawl space after their fight, too ashamed to face her, too broken to ask for help. He had planned to come out, but he never did. The journal told the rest of the story, how he had waited, how fear had kept him silent, how days turned into something darker. By the time anyone realized he was missing, it was already too late. Rebecca's quiet sobs filled the basement, echoing against the cold walls. I stood there feeling something inside me crack open, not just for her, but for myself, because regret isn't loud. It doesn't scream or demand attention. It waits. It lingers in the spaces we ignore, in the words we never say, in the chances we let slip away because we think there will always be another one. That day didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain or bring back what was lost, but it gave Rebecca something she hadn't had in years. The truth, and sometimes, the truth is the first step toward healing. In the weeks that followed, I helped her repair more than just her basement. We fixed broken shelves, repainted walls, cleared out years of dust and silence. But more importantly, we talked. About loss, about guilt, about the strange ways life gives us opportunities to try again, even when we think it's too late. I started calling my ex-wife again. Not to fix what was broken, but to finally say the things I never had the courage to say before. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, instead of just standing still. Rebecca began to smile more. It was small at first, almost uncertain, but it grew stronger with time. We didn't become something out of a fairy tale. There was no dramatic ending, no perfect resolution. Just two people, learning how to live again. If this story touched your heart in any way, take a moment to like, share, and comment. You never know who might need to hear something like this today. And before we reach the end, I want to ask you something special. Have you ever held on to something you wished you had said or done differently? Share it in the comments. You're not alone. Because sometimes the most important things in life aren't the ones we fix with our hands, but the ones we finally face with our hearts.